All right, welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Hamilton from Wine.pd. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. He has some really interesting perspectives on wellness. So, welcome to the show, Chief Hamilton. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, I don't think I asked you offline, but how many years total have you been in law enforcement?
25 years now. I've worked for two different agencies. So I began my career in the city of Detroit, and that's where we're located. So Wyandotte is located in the state of Michigan, just outside of Detroit. So I began in the city of Detroit. I worked there for about 2 years, and then I was fortunate enough to get hired by the city of Wyandotte, which is about 10 miles south of Detroit. And I've been here now for a little over 23 years in Wyandotte. So 25 years in total. And I'm still here. So it's working out.
I think when we talked offline, you told me that you work for a really busy county. Is that correct? You guys have a lot of activity going on.
Well, we're in the Wayne County. The city of Detroit's in Wayne County. We're in Wayne County. And yes, the county of Wayne in the state of Michigan is probably the most active and probably the busiest for call volume for the police.
And how did you decide 25 years ago that this was the career for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I recall being in high school and I would see police officers, and right away it was, man, I want to do that job. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what kind of training. I didn't know what I needed to do to get there, but I knew I wanted to do that. I had a great deal of respect for police officers, what they stood for, what they're symbolic of. And I wanted to do that. Is really as far as I can remember. I never recall wanting to do anything else.
I love that. I always recognize that we all have the ability to inspire other people. I think that we forget that sometimes, the way we present ourselves, the things that we do within the community. How do you think that current day officers can inspire other people? Are there certain things that they can do that would help maybe the younger generation to strive to also be like that?
Well, there's a lot of things. Police officers typically they're role models. They're
Mm,
a role model for me. When we see a police officer, we do put them on a higher pedestal in society. And so I just had this conversation that our officers need to police with empathy, right?
yeah.
They need to use an empathetic approach when policing because the things our officers do, they have a great impact on people, and it can be a negative impact, a very bad financial impact on people when they write tickets, when they arrest people, and there are people that need to be arrested, and we do that. However, they also need to let empathy guide them. Everybody has a story. Just because they're out there and maybe they're speeding or are driving on a suspended license, it necessarily doesn't mean that we need to write them a ticket or arrest them and impound their vehicle. We need to let empathy guide us. That's why the laws are black and white. I mean, there's no movement, right? The laws, they're written. However, the police officers have discretion, and that's very important because that discretion allows them to be flexible because the laws can't account for all of the moving parts, the totality of the circumstances involving a certain incident. But police officers are human; they can, and the police officers they can have a great positive impact on community members if they police with empathy. That's one of the things that they can do to I guess touch others.
I really like that, and I think about myself, a lot of times, even in really challenging situations, sometimes I just want to know that people understand what I'm going through. And that's what empathy is, right? It's showing up and saying, hey, I get it. Like, I understand that this is a hard situation right now, and I'm going to choose to lead with kindness, even if it's a situation that isn't great, right? We can use that really simple example of getting a ticket. You have the choice to be like, tough, here you go, or hey, I know that this is tough right now. I'm sorry that I have to do this, but I'm I can empathize with the situation, and I think sometimes people just need that certain level of kindness, and it does go a long way. It brings me kind of to my next question, and I don't think that we were really planning on talking about this, but I think it's a question that a lot of people ask. It's how do you teach empathy? How do you teach emotional intelligence, especially to younger people who maybe haven't had a lot of lived experiences yet or don't have that experience on the streets yet to be able to connect and communicate and empathize and have that sort of awareness around a situation?
Well, right now, when we get employees in here, we have a lot of employees, right? We have police officers, we have dispatchers, we have record staff, we have a lot of, animal control. And once they get to us, if they haven't, and most of them have not had any special classes on emotional intelligence and specifically, using empathy to guide them, the only way you can do it is through conversations. It's
Mm.
important for people like myself, like our deputy police chief, and for our supervisors to not only speak to our officers and our employees when there's something wrong, but to speak to them when there isn't something wrong, to hop in a police car with them, to drive around with them, and have those conversations and talk to them. And people around here will tell you I do talk to them a lot. I probably bring up emotional intelligence in every conversation. In fact, this morning I spoke to one of our young employees, and I was talking to her about emotional intelligence and not allowing people to hijack your emotions and control you, and empathy. And it's just like the proverb states, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's very important. It's not easy to do, but once you start practicing it, your emotional intelligence, you adapt and you can do that. I believe some people, including myself, are more empathetic than others.
Yeah.
I've always had a great deal of empathy. Others are not, but in this line of work, police officers must be empathetic. They must, because when they stop someone like we spoke about earlier, and maybe it's just a speeding violation, or it could be, open intoxicants in a motor vehicle, or something like that. Sometimes, and a lot of times, it goes much further if we give that person a break. And that has a better impact. And, that person learned their lesson, right? Even if, they're doing something they're not supposed to, or where they're driving on a suspended license, it's a minor crime. It's, not the end of the world. But if we just tow that vehicle, arrest that person, is it really, what's it going to accomplish?
Mm.
Now, if we give that person a break, we don't tow that car, we give them a ride home, park their car, or don't write them that speeding ticket, what is their perception of law enforcement going to be in the future?
Yeah.
Right. And in this day and age, in law enforcement, we do have there's a negative perception of law enforcement. And we need to kind of change that a little bit, I think. And part of that is using emotional intelligence and using empathy.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that there are going to be some people who innately are more empathetic and have more emotional intelligence than maybe someone next to them. I think that the way that we are, and maybe this is just my opinion, but the way that we are is based on our previous experiences and our preconditioning. So, how were we raised? What have we gone through in our lives? How have we overcome certain things? I think that you develop certain skills based on the experiences that you have in life. But I also agree with you that I think that these things, empathy, communication, effective communication, emotional intelligence. These are things that are very learnable, teachable. These are things that you can develop over time. And I really like that as a leadership team, you guys are really focusing on this, especially for the younger generation. We talked about this a little bit offline, but I'm noticing that with the younger generation, because of there's so much technology available, communication is lost a little bit. They're so used to communicating via text, or I don't even know what they're using anymore, Twitter, tweets. DMs, whatever it is. And so being able to continue to train the younger people on how to have effective conversations, how to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Maybe you haven't gone through a lot of things yet. Maybe you had a really great upbringing and you haven't had a lot of adversity yet, and it's hard to kind of empathize with certain things. Or maybe you're a young officer and you're entering into a DB call and you've never ever experienced anything like that before. And so it's hard for you to relate. But by being able to have conversations with other people, maybe who have gone through those things, then you're able to learn and develop those skills over time. So I like that you have a focus on that.
Yes, and you nailed it. It's, we all, everything we see, everything we do, it's perspective, right? It's our perspective of that event. And that's created by our life experiences. And I always say this too, is that's what we're composed of, our life experiences.
Mhm.
So, two people can see the same event and they'll have completely different stories of what happened. And it's because of their life experiences. In you constantly see police interactions on the news, right? And you'll have one group of people that look at it and it's a negative interaction, and the police officer did wrong and that was terrible. Whereas another group will look at it and say, that was actually an outstanding job. The police officer did exactly what he or she were supposed to do. And those perspectives are shaped by their life experiences. If somebody has a negative interaction with a police officer, they're likely to be biased and they're going to have a negative perception
Mhm.
of police work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that um, it's important for us to not judge how someone responds to something just because we don't see it a certain way. And I'm going to relate this to wellness. So, um, there might be a situation that really impacts me, but doesn't impact you at all. And the person who's not impacted by that, I think it's really important to not judge the person that is impacted by that because, again, we all see things differently. And I think the idea, again, is empathy, emotional intelligence, understanding that just because something doesn't impact you doesn't mean that it doesn't impact other people, and we need to lift each other up and try to create an environment where everybody succeeds. And I think sometimes we get in our own way, and I see this a lot in the wellness space where maybe there's a critical incident and you have half the room that's like I'm good and the other half of the room that's like I am not good. And so, how can you create an environment that for the people who are good to say, hey, it's okay that you're not good? Just because I'm good doesn't mean you have to be. How can we get you good? How can we get you to that point where, we're all thriving? And so, I think that, we have to take that into consideration, especially when it comes to wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to, wellness in general, like your physical and mental wellness, I do think those are aligned. Your
Mhm.
physical and mental wellness are aligned, and you have to take care of yourself. Now, in regards to traumatic events for police officers, I do believe there are just some people that they shouldn't be on the job, and they gotta be real with themselves. If those type of events really bother a person and they can't overcome them and get past them, and it's actually causing them, a great deal of stress, they need to get out of the job. There's so many other things they can do, and then there's others where they can manage their emotions a little better and they can handle those events. Then okay, then that job, this type of work is for them, and it's not, they should, no one should be ashamed if they can't handle it, because I've seen it. I've seen young police officers where they went to what really is routine in this line of work. You're going to see bad things, you're going to see shootings, you're going to see stabbings, you're going to see the worst of the worst, and you have to be able to separate yourself from that. You can't dwell on those things. You're gonna, just, you're gonna drive yourself crazy and constantly be stressed out. And it's important that everybody is, and all of us, we have to be, we can't, just because we want to keep an employee, tell him or her what they want to hear. No, we have to be honest with them, transparent, and let them know that, okay, if this isn't working for you, you perhaps look for a different career, and help them with that.
Yeah, I think, I had a chief recently, and I've heard this before. I've heard this, I'm sure you've heard this before too. They said it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And so the goal of wellness, because we've also had, and this is maybe an entirely different conversation that is for another time, but I've heard story after story after story about certain providers that kind of keep people in that cycle of like, I'm going to use quotes for this, but that kind of cycle of brokenness, and the goal of wellness is to get you moving forward. It's to get you better. We don't want you to stay in that space. Like the goal is to get you past it, to go through the storm, right? So that you can thrive and you can keep going in whatever capacity that is. And so I agree with you in the sense that it's okay not to be okay, but we can't stay not okay. We got to figure out what that next step is and what that solution is to get you okay. And, I've had other chiefs say this too. And maybe getting you okay means that you do leave the profession, but can we keep you in the profession? Can we get you okay so that you can have that resiliency? Can we get you okay so that you can continue this career? Yes or no? And then kind of make that game day decision at that point. But the goal is never to keep you in that like vicious cycle of not being okay.
Yeah, and that's important, in law enforcement, really just in life in general, regardless of your occupation, but specifically law enforcement, that we do take care of ourselves, right? All of us need to take care of ourselves, and I always tell everybody, and I always have different reactions, but the most important thing a person can do, hands down, should be number one on the list, is taking care of their health, right? Their physical health, because it is aligned with your mental health, your mental well-being, because it's going to reduce stress and things like that. But take care of yourself. You have to eat healthy. You have to exercise. And people will say, "Oh no, I don't have time." 'Cause I hear it all the time. I don't have time for that. My kids are number one. My family's number one. Well, think about that. If that's the truth, you want to be around for your kids, you want to be around for your family, you know you have to take care of yourself. That should be the first thing you can do, because that's in our control. A lot of things are outside our control, not that. You
Yeah,
can take care of yourself. We make conscious decisions on what we eat every day and what we do when we wake up, and it is so important to stay healthy physically, I believe, and everything else will fall in line.
I agree with you. And I definitely want to talk about physical wellness. I think that the excuses are really interesting. I was actually, this is so random. I was thinking about this the other day because I do a lot of talks with different, agencies, and the time thing is always a thing, right? I don't have time. And we have to reverse engineer things sometimes. We have to kind of question our like default mode, right? So like if you're always like, yeah, everyone else is first, to your point, we have to reverse engineer and say, yes, they are first. And in order for them to be first, you have to be effective. And so you have to take care of you to be effective, to then be able to prioritize them and put them first. So it's that reverse engineering. But I was at home, I was thinking about food and nutrition. And it's always when we talk about meal prep or, preparing your own healthy meals, it's, well, I don't have time. So I made a quick meal and it took me 3 minutes to put it together. Super healthy. I was sitting there and I was like, it takes more time to go through the drive-through than it did to do this, right? And so it's not time, it's a reprioritization of the time, but it's also convenience, I think. It's like, well, this is easier. And so is that the objection? Is the objection that this is easier? Because that's a different conversation than time, because we know that it's less time to do some of the healthier choices than some of the unhealthier choices. But is it really time or is it effort? And if it's effort, then what is worth your effort? Is your family worth your effort? Are your kids worth your effort? Because they need you to be good. So then we have an entirely different conversation about the objection. Now the objection is effort or convenience. So I'll get off my soapbox about that, but I do want to dive a little bit into physical fitness and wellness. And we know that that's an important facet of overall wellness. And I wanted to ask you, when it comes to physical wellness, how important do you think that is for the core functions and requirements of your career specifically?
It is extremely important. With police officers, you have to understand not only is it a physical job, you know, you're going to have to in this kind of work, you're going to have to chase criminals. You got to catch them.
Mhm.
You're going to be involved in fights. And I tell all of our police officers that you can almost guarantee, and it's multiple times in your career, if they have a 25-year career, there are going to be multiple times where they are going to get in a fight that's going to literally be for their life. They need to be physically healthy. All of our officers now, we get them trained in jiu-jitsu and ground fighting, and we encourage them to continue their physical fitness journey. When we hire them, we put them through a physical agility test. We're one of the only agencies, at least in our area, that makes that a requirement. And I'm not budging off that. It's so vital that they do that because I want physically fit officers for multiple reasons. For one, so they're good police officers, they're effective. They can handle that struggling suspect or that suspect who takes them on and tries to hurt them. They can catch that individual who's jumping fences, and they may have to run, 10 or 11 blocks. But also, your physical fitness is how people perceive you and your agency.
Mhm.
The first thing that people see is your physical fitness when you walk into a room. Police officers are no different. When they go into a house at a domestic or some kind of disturbance and they're in their uniform and the suspect or suspects can clearly tell that this person is physically fit, they will likely not challenge them as often as they would if that person is not. When I first started working, I was working in the city of Detroit. And I worked midnights. I go to court. So I'm in court as I'm walking out of court because we used to have to walk like 5 blocks to our car. So I'm walking to my car and I'm in uniform. There was a guy who was there who was arrested. He was a defendant, and he was walking back with me. And he was a nice guy. I mean, we're talking away, having a conversation, and he let me know. And at the time, I'm in my early 20s. He let me know. He said, "Man, if I seen you," he's like, "No way am I running from you." He's like, "Because you're physically fit." He goes, but he told me that when he gets pulled over by the police, he sizes up the officer or officers who stop him. If he knows he can outrun them, if they look overweight, he's gone. He said, but if they look like at the time myself, he said, no, he'll stay right there. So they're always sizing us up. And because we work in the public sector, it's so important that we keep our physical fitness up, to be effective at the job, but also to give an effective presence to deter people like that person I was talking to from running from us or fighting with us.
Yeah, so essentially you're saying that fitness is a de-escalation tool.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a de-escalation tool. And also, people who are physically fit, and I know this is a general statement, but they typically do carry less stress.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one of the ways I kind of decompress is I go on long runs. And when I'm doing that, when I'm done running 6, 7, 8 miles, I'm too tired to be stressed out. And it improves your mood. It absolutely does. When we are healthy, we just are better, we're better. We're more efficient, we're just a better person. And when we eat healthy and we take care of ourselves. So I would much rather work with people who are fit because I know they are in general, they're happier people. And those who are not, they're kind of stuck. And I've been stuck there before. I've gone months where I'm eating poorly and everything. And then once I turn that around and get back on track, I feel much better. And people who aren't as physically fit, they're just not as happy. It really seems that way.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of science to support that. And so I 100% agree. And I think that physical fitness is a really good strategy. If you haven't been taking care of yourself, start there. Start somewhere. Walk,
Absolutely.
walk around the block, like do something really simple and build on that because it'll make you feel healthier, happier. And it also impacts not just your mood and your productivity, which we can see a direct correlation with that, but it also impacts your decision making. And you're more likely to make effective decisions if you feel better physically and mentally, right? And if you have less stress, like you said. So, do you think that physical fitness is, or physical wellness is a safety concern? Maybe the lack of physical fitness is a safety concern.
Well, it's absolutely a safety concern. In this line of work, people are counting on us
Mm.
to protect them. We have to protect ourselves. And if we're not physically able to do that, we're putting ourselves in jeopardy, but also the citizens who we're there to protect. There's been multiple times in my career and most police officers' career where you're in a violent fight and you have to be stronger than that individual, and typically that person has more adrenaline running through them, and they're for the first few seconds they're going to be a little faster and a little stronger than you, and you have to overcome that and outlast them. So physical fitness, absolutely. To effectively perform this job, police officers, they must be physically fit.
Yeah. I know you said that you have requirements for entering into your agency, physical fitness requirements and agility. You said it's an agility test.
Yes. So any new person, new hire, we run them through a physical agility test. It consists of just a mile run, push-ups, and sit-ups. So it's not that hard. But
Yeah.
we really are sizing up to see, to check their physical fitness. Once they get hired, now we can't keep them, right? Employee law, we can't make them work out. We can't make them do these things. They have to do that themselves. However, we do give them an incentive to do it. So they can earn money per their contract twice a year. So they can earn $1,000 a year if they keep themselves in shape. So twice a year, we give them a physical agility test to give them that incentive.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation and I don't know if we have time to really dive super deep into it, but it's that kind of question of like carrot or stick. Do we make wellness and physical fitness mandatory or do we incentivize it, carrot or stick? And I think a lot of agencies, I know you said that you're one of the only agencies that you know of that has that entry level requirement in testing. There are a lot of agencies that are scared to have any sort of requirement coming in because recruitment is so challenging right now. What would you say to someone who's maybe in that boat that's like, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know if we can do this and we can make this a requirement because we're already struggling to get people in the door?
And I understand that. The way so no difference here, right? There are fewer people in our country that are entering law enforcement. The last I checked, it was down by 20%, and it's probably greater than that now.
Mhm.
So what we had to do is we had to create our own police officers. So I would recommend that to any other law enforcement agency. Is the old days we put out advertisement, they would all come to us certified police officers, right? Now we have to create our own. So we do put them through this physical agility test, and we do get a lot of applicants because we send them to the police academy. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, we have 4 recruits in the police academy right now who just started. We just received 2 more, I think, a month ago.
Mm.
So we make sure these candidates are physically fit. We do run them through our agility tests. We don't want to lower our standards. We have gone periods where we're down quite a bit of officers, uh, you know, because we don't want to lower those standards. So I know it's different for every agency, but I would encourage every agency to keep those standards high and make sure, because when you ensure that these officers are physically fit, you're doing them a service. You're doing them disservice if you let them get in this profession and not be physically able to handle themselves.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there's a certain level of support that the younger, newer officers feel of like, wow, this agency is really committed to my wellness and setting that standard early in their career with the hopes that they're going to continue that throughout their career. But to your point, I think, the burning question is how do you get people to continue to prioritize themselves? As an agency, there are a lot of things that you can do to provide resources and incentives and set everyone off on the right foot early in their career, but ultimately it's up to them to continue that throughout their career and to make themselves a priority. So, how do we get people to take care of themselves?
Tell you what, it's really the short answer is you can't. And I know that sounds awful, but it is very difficult. You have to do it through conversations, through communication. You have to talk to them. You're not going to get to everybody.
Mm,
You know, we have a gym that's open at our police station 24/7, and it's a very nice gym. Our officers, all of our employees, because we have a lot of dispatches. We dispatch for 5 different cities and we conduct animal control for 5 different cities. We have a lot of employees. They all can use that gym 24/7, but it's always the same group who are in that gym.
mhm.
So people have to be intrinsically motivated to take care of themselves. External motivation is temporary for all of us. You know, there's every single person I know, including myself. You'll get up, you'll get motivated for a day, and then that alarm clock goes off, and you're not today. I'll work out tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, so the best thing you can do is like the conversation I had with a young employee this morning. You talk to them, you let them know the importance of it. They listen to podcasts like this. It's very important. And finally, it will resonate. Not everybody, it just won't. But the thing is, can we change, maybe 10, 15% of them and kind of, you know, really show them how important this is. Because once a person realizes it, I think if everyone could reach up like their peak physical fitness, right, their peak level, and they experience it just for a month or two, they would realize, wow, how good I feel, and they would be more, I guess, motivated to continue that. But a lot of people don't. They don't. They never experience it.
I honestly couldn't agree more. I was smiling when you said that because um, I was actually thinking about this yesterday, and I truly believe that if we rely on motivation, we're setting ourselves up for failure every time. It's never about motivation, it's about consistency and dedication, but there has to be that intrinsic like driving force that creates the consistency and the dedication. And so I actually had someone ask me that same question recently. I was doing like a leadership meeting, and they were like, how do we get our people to do the things, or how do you get people to do it, is what they asked me. And I was like, I don't. And I think that they weren't expecting me to say that, but I said the same thing. I was like, I don't. I don't have success telling people what to do, especially as an outsider. Maybe, as a leadership team, you have more of that influence, to encourage people to do things, and maybe they're going to listen to you more. But I think for me, an outsider coming in being like, do this, they're like, who are you to tell me what to do? But I also think that wellness is personal. And if we're not careful, people can shut down because they don't want to be told what to do with their own body and, nutrition. But what I try to do in a strategy that I have found to be successful is I really try to encourage everyone to take a moment of self assessment and ask yourself your why. Why is it important for you to be physically, mentally, emotionally, nutritionally? You can put as many different pillars as you want, but why is it important for you to be mentally and physically well? And everyone is going to look a little bit different depending on where they are in their career, where they are in their lives. Ultimately, through conversations I've had, at its core, most people, it's for longevity. And most people say things that are outside of themselves. So most people are going to say it's my kids, it's my family, or it's my team. I want to like be effective for my team. So it's usually for other people, but I think if everyone can just take a moment, ask yourself, what is my why? Why is it important for me to be well? And let's say, for example, it's your family. That's the motivator when that alarm clock goes off at 4 a.m. and you don't want to do it. You remind yourself, I'm doing it for them. So that's where I found success. So I completely agree with you. We can't make them do it, but how can we get them to identify maybe that intrinsic motivation within themselves so that they can create the consistency?
They have to realize that it really improves the quality of your life,
Mhm.
right? It's longevity, but it's also the quality of the time you have here. And they once they realize that and they experience it, then they'll be motivated. They'll motivate themselves, and that's what you have to do. But you do that through, messages like this, right? Perhaps somebody's listening to this and they decide, I'll try it, and then once they get in the flow, and we all know that it's easy to get out of that flow for sure. I just went on vacation a couple weeks ago, and man, that throws you through a loop because you eat what you want, you wake up when you want, and it is hard to get back in that rhythm.
Yeah.
And we got to bring ourselves back there. And for someone who doesn't routinely do that, they're not consistent because it's all about consistency. I
Yep.
mean, you're definitely not motivated every day. My alarm every day, I have that thing set for 3:05 in the morning. And I wake up and the first thing I do, I don't have time to think. It's the same routine. I get dressed, get coffee, and I'm off to the gym. And yeah, it's cold here in Michigan. Okay, so well, in the wintertime it's tough because it's freezing outside, and you have to do it. You have to be consistent. There are many days you don't get sleep. Maybe you get woke up in the middle of the night. Like last night, I barely got any sleep, but I did it anyway. I remember when my alarm went off today. I thought, man, I have two options here. I can go, but I haven't missed a day in a while. Maybe I could just go back to sleep and actually get some sleep because I was on fumes. I
Mhm.
chose to get up and go. I was not motivated to go, but you can't wait for motivation.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate you adding to that and saying there's a book that I read that said something along the same lines of yes, it's longevity. We want you to live a long life, but it's quality of life. And anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure can agree. Like, I don't think anyone wants to get to the end of this thing and not have quality of life. Like we all want to be in this for a long time, but we also want to be able to do the things. We want to be able to spend time with our family. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to do these things, that we worked so hard for. And if you get to the end and you're crawling to the finish line, like we want to power walk to the finish line. How do we get there? And so I appreciate you adding to that. Like, yes, it's longevity, but we have to add the quality on top of that. For the younger men and women who are entering into this career, what words of wisdom would you share with them? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
The main thing I tell them is everything's temporary. People come to me with a lot of problems. It's employees, it's citizens, and I always let them know, listen, it's all temporary. Our career here, even though you think it's 25 or 30 years, it's temporary. There's
Mm.
going to be a day you're going to be sitting on your porch and you're going to miss these problems. And we often make problems bigger than they are. In this line of work, you could get involved in a criminal case that's really stressing you out. I see detectives that are so stressed out, and that's what I tell them. So I even tell it to the older generation, but young people have to realize everything's temporary. Everything's going to go by quickly in life. Enjoy it. It's nothing's that serious. It really isn't. I know we have a serious job and we deal with a lot of, serious issues, but realistically, like a lot of our problems, 90% of our problems, they're not that serious. It's all temporary, including problems. So enjoy life.
Wow. Thank you. I actually really appreciate that reminder. I think that it's all about how we perceive things. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I was like, I need to apply that to my life too sometimes. I think we all are guilty of doing that and holding on to things. And I really like that attitude of, let it go. It's okay. Enjoy your life. Try to have some gratitude, some positivity, and not take things too seriously. So
Yeah, and you have to remind yourself, I do it all the time. It's not something that you brush off problems. When I get hit with problems and I feel myself starting to get stressed, I just kind of smile to myself and think, this is we've dealt with so many problems in our lives like I have, as I'm older, and the problems I was worried about 6 months ago, I can't even remember them. 2, 3 years ago, I couldn't even tell you what they were, but it stressed me out. So in 2 years, in probably 2 months, the problems that we have today, they'll be gone. So there's no sense of getting stressed out over it. But I have to remind myself all the time as well.
yeah, well, you said earlier about like controlling the controllable. And the way we respond to things, the way we act and react is something that is within our control. And as you were talking, I thought to myself, like, how, and maybe this sounds so weird, but like, how lucky are we to have the opportunity to be stressed? Like, there's going to be a day where we're not going to be here anymore, you know, and this is the youngest we're ever going to be. And so, having the opportunity to experience life still is a gift. And sometimes it doesn't seem that way. But when you're talking, I'm like, wow, like we get to be stressed. We're still here, you
Yes.
know?
I all the time, and I'm sure any police officer, definitely police administrators, whoever's listening, they'll share the same thing. But we get a lot of complaints, a lot of calls, and they're minor problems, right? It's just minor issues. I have um, a frequent caller, and she complains about the school across the street. Now, that school was there when she moved in, but she complains about the kids when they go to the playground, how they're always screaming and yelling. And what I told her is, okay, if you're sitting on your porch, enjoy that. Kids' laughter is bothering her. You have to enjoy these things that sometimes we perceive as a problem, but we are so fortunate to have those problems because, and usually these problems are very minor. So I love how you worded that and said that is we are so fortunate. We need to have gratitude. And that's how we have to look at things is you have to be grateful for the things you have. When I get stressed out here, I stop and think, I'm just grateful to be here,
Yeah,
and that gratitude will get you past any kind of problem. So
I
important to have gratitude.
I agree. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation. If I missed anything, if there's anything else that you want to add, please feel free. But thank you. I appreciate your time very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Of course.